Data from the National Bureau of Statistics shows the country's third quarter GDP climbed 4.9% from last year. It also brings the output for the first 9 months to 0.7% from a year ago. Global policymakers are pinning their hopes on a robust recovery in China to help restart demand as economies struggle with heavy lockdowns. So what does China's economic growth and quick recovery from the coronavirus might mean for the rest of the world? Let's talk to our panelists. For more on the latest with the Chinese economy, we are joined in Beijing. Yao Yang, Director of the China Center for Economic Research with Peking University. In Shanghai, Chen Jun, Executive Dean of the Fanhai International School of Finance with Fudan University. Last but not least, in Bangkok, Jeffrey Towson, Guanghua School of Management with Peking University. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. First of all, the number looks quite encouraging, 4.9 this quarter compared to the same period last year. Professor Yao, your take.
4.9 is really good, but it was a little lower than the consensus prediction. I think it's still because most of the recovery in China has been on the supply side, investment, real estate development, and also export. On the consumption side, there are encouraging signs. For example, retail values registered a positive growth. But even with that, consumption lagged behind. I think that's why the number was a little bit lower than the consensus prediction. But as I said, 4.9 is a greater number already.
Yeah, and as a result of that, we already see the first 3 quarters together, if we look at them as a whole, positive growth of GDP already, Professor Chen.
Yes, so again, echoing what Professor Yang has said, consumption recovery typically lags behind in this type of situation because you do need people to gather around to produce services and to consume. So in that sense, it's not surprising. The good news is that, for example, during the National Holiday Week, we do see even industries like tourism picking up. So the overall trend is very good. And the fact that most of the sectors are recovering says this is not a one sector-led recovery, but overall economy is growing.
The momentum could be even more important than just the number itself, isn't it, Mr. Towson?
It's the direction that matters most, because these numbers could be going in the other direction. And we saw that not too long ago. And that, if you're running a business, you really have to think about what am I going to be like in 6 months? How much cash do I need? Is this getting worse or is it getting better? And we are a world away from March and April, where everyone was battening down the hatches and trying to ride out the storm. This is coming out the other side, so I think you're going to see a lot of enthusiasm from the business community. At least a lot less, say, panic.
We hope that will be the case, but the dampening effect of the global economy, and also if you go to different localities, the third, the fourth, and even fifth tiers of Chinese cities and counties, economy, local ones are still quite struggling, isn't it, Professor Yao, frankly speaking?
The recovery has not been even, right? So most of the recovery has been led by, as I said, the export, local government investment, and some of it just the real estate development. So many SMEs still lag behind, right? So most of them are either located in the services sector in first-tier cities or in the third, fourth-tier cities. So that's right. But as Professor Towson said, the direction is right. I think the most encouraging thing is that now disposable income has become positive growth. That's very impressive because even by the middle of this year, one of my colleagues in our school found the unemployment rate, which is still very high. So if we see disposable income is growing, that means unemployment rate is dropping really dramatically. Because we are talking about the year-on-year growth, right, not month-on-month growth. So that's a great achievement, I think.
Having said that, though, all of you have been touching on consumption side. What do you think can be really the driving force in order to encourage that to, be more promising? We can't celebrate the National Day every month, right? The consumers have to willing to spend. What is going to make sure that's going to happen, Professor Chen?
So as Professor Thompson said, I think the expectation is very important. Consumers, just like households, consumers, just like corporations, they need to observe what's been the trend. If they are very comfortable that the trend, the recovery trend, the growth trend continues, and as Professor Yao said, that the disposable income has recovered, in fact, it's growing, then they feel more comfortable in increased spending, especially perhaps increase in big item spending, right? Even people, we know that people were trying to have a wedding ceremony. They were putting this off for a few months, buying a house, big items. The other thing I want to emphasize is that we have online spending and offline. So what the national holiday does, again, as you said, it's true. We can't have the national holiday every week. But the fact is that we do see people visiting malls. The offline consumption spending, hopefully, with the two factors I mentioned, household disposable income rising, and also the expectation, the trend is not going back, it's going up, consumption will pick up more.
And one of the things about the National Day holiday spending has a lot to do with instilling more confidence about the pandemic prevention and control with such mass traveling here in China over the past 2 to 3 weeks. And obviously, we haven't seen the number increase in sharp sense at all. Professor Towson, as a result of that, how much encouraged do you think people will be to travel and to do business, at least within China, to encourage this, what China calls so-called internal circulation?
Right. I mean, we can kind of make a distinction between, say, the national holiday, which was a lot about travel, and let's say Singles Day coming up, which is shopping without the travel. Travel has been inordinately hit. We probably want more shopping festivals and less travel holidays, just because the nature of this disease inordinately hits travel. It's just a fluke. If you're in the hotel or travel business, there's not a lot you can do. So I think Singles Day is going to be a better indicator of how fast Chinese consumption is coming back than, say, how many people are getting on planes right now, which is just a funny situation. So yeah, I'm looking forward to Singles Day. I think the number's going to jump, but I'm just guessing.
Yeah, Singles Day, just a reference for our viewers worldwide. Of course, it's on the 11th of the month of November. It's 11/11/11/11. So people see that number. So, Professor Yao, will Singles Day solve China's problem?
You're asking me because that's my birthday.
Oh, congrats.
So
happy birthday in advance. I hope you will spend more.
Always celebrate my birthday on that day. I actually not that optimistic as Professor Thompson has said. My prediction is that this year's Singles Day sales is not going to take over last year's. It takes time, right? And if you look at the National Day holidays, look at the number of travelers recovered by like 90% or something like that, 80%, 90%. But look at the spending, only 70, 80%. So it is a 10 percentage points gap of it, which means people travel, but people didn't spend that much, right? So I think Professor Chen was quite correct. There's one thing, lack of income. The other one is people still worry about a future, right?
Professor Chen, please come in and join us about this online shopping. Of course, Singles Day is mainly about online shopping spree. That has been quite a big pillar to encourage Chinese consumers. Will it happen this time?
Let me take an average of those two speakers. I do think it's important indicator, right? Because as Professor Townsend has mentioned, this is designed to induce consumption, and this year takes on added significance. I echo Professor Yao's point is that I think there's still a lot of uncertainty. As long as the growth is not even, there are enough households, younger households, they look out the horizon. If they're not sure that their income will continue to rise for half a year or a year, if there's still some uncertainty on the career path they have, maybe they will not buy more than they usually do. If we're trying to compare year-on-year growth, so my own guess will be, I think there's still a likelihood there is growth, but it's a very small one. But even with that number, if we have, it's even or a very small growth, that's still very significant, because that means, as I said in the beginning, consumption is the last sector, if you will, to grow. And if it starts to fully recover and grow, that means the growth should be sustainable.
Another thing, of course, very important is China's economy is not one of its own. It's totally connected to the rest of the world. Now, there are possibilities that as a result of COVID-19 still quite rampant in the other parts of the world, China's manufacturing sector could support the rest of the world during this process in order to maintain certain level of commodities supply. But on the other hand, there's also the issue that when the economies elsewhere are not necessarily going back, China as an economy so closely linked to the rest of the world might also suffer. So how do you see that both sides of the story, Professor Townsend?
Yeah, I mean, there's certain levers you can pull and certain things that are under your control and certain things aren't. If you're exporting to certain countries right now, there's just not a lot to be done. You're waiting. And consumption, you can push that lever, and I think Alibaba in particular is going to do that on Singles Day. So I'll put a stake in the ground. I think we're going to see growth in Singles Day from last year. I think that's something you can do. But the export factor, you just wait, and the companies in those sectors basically watch their balance sheets, and they figure out how much cash they have left, and they see if they're in good shape or in panic shape. And that's where I think this sort of light at the end of the tunnel phenomenon is incredibly important. If you're running a small business with a lot of export manufacturing, the fact that these numbers are getting better is a world away than a couple months ago, where it's like, I don't know if we're going to make it. So that's a lot of that. There's not much you can do. You just wait. But the timing is one thing. The level, are we going to get back? I think we are.
Patience is one thing. Survival is another thing. Professor, go ahead.
Looking into the next few months, I think we have to factor American election into the calculation. Right? It sounds like Biden is going to win. I hope this time the polls are going to be correct. And also, the gap is so big. It's 10 percentage points, right? Not like 4 years ago, only 3 percentage points, right? So there's a huge likelihood that Biden is going to win the election. And then what's the reaction of Trump, right? Is he going to step down smoothly, or like some of those militias in U.S. said that we're going to have a civil war? If Trump refuses to step down, that would be a disaster, not just for the United States, but also for the whole world. That's going to have a huge impact on China's export.
Professor Chen, once again about this question, China's economy is so much linked to the rest of the world. This is also so-called the outer circulation China has been talking about. But how do you see different sides of it?
So I want to add to the discussion a couple of things. One is that if you look at the trading patterns between China and other parts of the world, there are some new results that, if you add import and export bilateral, China has the most with Southeast Asian economies. And if you add up Japan and Korea, South Korea, that's a very big block.
Yes.
It's almost the same as the entire Eurozone. And then the US will be fourth or fifth. So if you must look at the trading patterns, certainly the countries and regions that are doing a lot of trade with China will benefit more. So I think this sort of global patterns of trading is also important, and that's consistent with what Professor Yao said, is that the U.S. uncertainty will impact globally, but as the trading patterns we've already observed that nations and regions and economies evolve in terms of they perhaps do business with partners, all else equal, that they feel are more steady or stable. If there's dramatic change on the U.S. side, maybe in terms of U.S.-China relations, we might see some sort of revival in the U.S.-China economic relationship, because we know that the last 2 or 3 years it's been on a downward trend. So what I try to say is that these trading partners with China and with each other are not equal, and hopefully we will see some uncertainty resolved, not added after the first week of November.
Next question. It's also important, which is what policies can still be adopted in order to encourage the Chinese economy going more in the positive trend, while at the same time be a positive influencer in the world, but at least in the neighborhood, to encourage other economies and interact with the others. Professor Chen.
So I think, overall, the fiscal policy, the combination of fiscal policy and monetary policy have been good.
What do you mean by good?
Supportive the economy, but not overly aggressive. So my own sense is that they should keep that. If you look at the monetary side, the aggregate money supply, or what we call the social financing, has been growing, but growing at a lower speed. You still need to have supportive policies out there. I don't think, despite the growth number, I don't think now is the time for the regulators or for the policymakers to pull back. I don't think we're not there yet. And again, repeating what Professor Townsend said, this is really crucial for firms, because firms want to see, one, they want to see a very steady economic outlook. The other thing, they still want to see that in the environment they operate in, taxes are not going up, expenses are not dramatically going up. So I think we should not be talking about withdrawing these supportive policies.
Professor Townsend.
Yeah, I mean, a couple months ago, the thing that was really, when this started out, one of the biggest worries was, you're a small business, you're a medium business, you probably owe the bank some money. Most businesses have some degree of debt. Suddenly that becomes untenable. Are the banks going to start foreclosing or seizing, saying, oh, you've broken your covenants? And I think the banks rightly, either by their own choice or they were told to do so, was back off. Let these companies get through this. Don't start calling these loans right now. Yeah. And that's, incredibly important, because that's just it's game over for a business if you can't make your loan, and then whether they're going to shut you down. So that kind of just tactical support, that's not even really a regulatory or a fiscal measure. It's just sort of message from above. Everybody sort of take it easy for a while. And I think that was very helpful, gave them some room to run. It's the debt that puts you out of business first.
There's always
the other stuff hits you later.
Yeah. There's always a debate about the degrees of policies, right? To how much you do and at what time, whether it is the right way. Professor Yao.
We are going to face some challenges. As I said, the recovery has not been even. Next, we want to see SMEs to recover. I don't think that we have resolved the finance of this kind of companies, right? So in the course of recovery, we didn't rely on those companies. But in the next stage, we have to boost their production. Then we're going to face the problem of shortage of finance provided to those firms. So I think after this deleveraging process in the last 2.5 years, we have to find a new equilibrium in our regulatory framework. We haven't got to that. I believe that's going to be another hurdle we have to overcome. So, as Professor Chen said, if you look at the growth rate of total social finance, it has been growing by a growth rate smaller than our conventional growth rate. What does that mean? That means the whole economy was kind of growing under the potential, right? So if we want to boost the economy back to the potential, then we have to increase the speed of money expansion, then also to channel the money into the real economy.
Right. And finally, before we go, I want to once again say happy birthday in advance to Professor Yao. But I wonder, as economists yourself, whether you have a shopping list to have for the day of this Singles Day, or for an average consumption as a consumer in China. Maybe everyone could help me a wish list. Professor Chen, let me start with you. You're in Shanghai, a lot to shop about.
I don't do a lot of shopping. I have what in Chinese we call leaders in the household. Mm-hmm. They do their shopping and they do their shopping for me.
Right. Your wife, of course. Yes.
I might have a daughter too.
Okay, good for you.
I might buy some books, but I'm interested in observe the number. I will watch how the numbers go because and also I will keep an eye on what Professor Yao said, SME financing, and I do agree that's something very important for the next phase of sustainable growth.
Yeah, you mean the numbers of your own household and also the national household. I'm sure that's what you meant, huh? And Professor Towson?
Oh, I'm righteously frugal. I study consumption and consumers the way an anthropologist studies tribes. I'm purely an observer. Yeah, I mean, outside of books, like a million books, and that's pretty much it, yeah.
Okay. I guess practice makes it perfect means the other way. Let me go to Professor Yao. What about you? It's your birthday.
Yeah, it's my birthday, right? So every year I received a gift from my wife, so I totally rely on her to decide.
See, we have gender equity at home. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, the three economists, for joining us. Yao Yang, Chen Jun, and Jeffrey Towson. Really appreciate it. All the best, and be safe wherever you are. Thank you so much.